Chapter 2: Ingredients for How We Think, Feel, and Behave. The whole idea of a predictive brain was a real eye opener for me. I was initially introduced to the concept by Malcolm Gladwell in his book, Blink: The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. He discusses the decisions we make unconsciously, snap judgments, and split second decisions. Our conscious reactions come out of a locked room, and we can't look inside that room, he explains. But with experience, we become experts at using our behavior and our training to interpret and decode what lies behind our snap judgment and first impressions. It wasn't until I read How Emotions Are Made: The Secret Life of the Brain that I better understood the mechanisms behind unconscious decisions. In reality, most feelings, thoughts, and behaviors are derived unconsciously. Here is author Lisa Feldman Barrett's take on it. In every waking moment, your brain uses past experience, organized as concepts, to guide your actions and give your sensations meaning. When the concepts involved are emotion concepts, your brain constructs instances of emotion. I already shared that a network of neurons wire together to facilitate learning. Everything from how to use a fork to what makes you mad, stored for future use by the brain. Another term for a cluster of wired neurons is a concept. For example, the concept of a bagel, a round, donut-sized roll made with flour, yeast, water, salt, and sugar, containing a hole in the middle with a hard crust exterior and an interior of dense bread. While there might be many different kinds of bagels, that description covers the concept of a bagel. Let's use the experience of eating a bagel for the first time. The sensory input includes where you were, who you were with, how it appeared, the scents entering the nose as you drew it close to your mouth, the textures and flavors as you chewed, and the noises from the crunch of the crust, along with the environment around you. Was there music playing or other people talking? All of these are incoming sensory inputs from the outside world. Another factor in the experience was how you felt inside. In addition to hunger, were you excited, curious, skeptical, stressed, tired, or sick? All of these can play into your experience. But before that first bite, the brain did what it does best: predict. As a first time bagel consumer, you do not have an existing concept for a bagel that the brain can use. But there are concepts for something like a bagel. A bagel is made with ingredients similar to many bread products, so the brain uses the most like concept to construct a prediction or a best guess, just like the snake that was a rope. We are constantly using the past for our predictions. Without a past, we don't have a future. We have no idea what we like or don't like, what is essential, what's trivial. Not remembering the past is one of the great tragedies of dementia. My mother-in-law, who suffers from Alzheimer's, will look at a plate of food and ask, "Do I like this?" She's never quite sure if she likes the taste of the food. Plus, now she's eating foods that she wouldn't have before. She forgot she didn't like them. For some readers, this might be rudimentary or simple. For those who are first learning about the predictive process of the brain, also known as predictive coding, this might sound weird or far-fetched, not aligning with what appears to be reality. Albert Einstein once said, "Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one." That can be hard to swallow, even when you know it is true. Most of us are familiar with the five senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Additionally, we have the vestibular system, which is responsible for the sense of balance, motion, and spatial orientation. We use it to ride a skateboard or maintain balance walking on uneven pavement or rocks. We also have the sense called proprioception, which is the body's external awareness. This sense informs us as to where our arms, legs, and body are at any moment. Proprioception is how you can put your head back, close your eyes, and touch your nose. Then there is interoception, the body's internal awareness of how we feel inside. When your tummy grumbles because of hunger, this is interoception, how we catch our interior feelings. Regarding emotions, what we see, hear, and feel inside our bodies are the big players in sensory input. They can also play big tricks on us, impacting our ability to identify and manage our emotions. What I'm about to share is in no way a comprehensive overview. That would be a book of its own. This chapter provides examples of the brain's predictive processing of sensory signals and how sensory processing can impact our emotions. Also of note is the interconnectedness of the body's sensory systems. Like most everything else in the body, sensory systems don't work in a silo. Sense of sight. Vision is the product of the brain's predictions of light waves entering the body via your eyes. We see what we expect to see based on probabilities and priorities. Our field of vision is quite vast, meaning there's a lot to choose from all this incoming data. So the brain filters out what isn't necessary. We don't know what we're missing. Because it is a prediction, sometimes what we think we just saw isn't that at all, or we don't view what is in plain sight. Once again, the brain can get it wrong. Here's an example of a visual prediction error. You see someone you think is your friend Joe. As you approach them to say hello, as the brain corrects itself, you realize the person is a stranger. The excitement turns to embarrassment as you explain that you thought they were someone else, but this isn't the only way the brain fools us. My investigation into sensory perception uncovered some interesting facts about how the brain creates what we see and how it makes sense of incoming light waves. We have a hole in our vision. I never liked science as a kid, which is crazy since I'm so interested in it now. I should have paid more attention if my science teacher taught me this. I used to think a blind spot was what you couldn't see when you looked in your car's side view mirror. It turns out we have a blind spot in our eyes. Imagine the walls of an eyeball as having nothing but photoreceptors. Photoreceptors are the receiver of light waves, and they're responsible for converting light into signals sent to the brain. The brain doesn't see, but takes those signals and predicts what we perceive. There's a point on the wall where the optic nerve attaches so the brain can receive the information. Because of this, there's a hole in the complete picture of signals. So then, why don't we notice that anything is missing? Prediction. Independently, each eye sends data. So the brain uses signals from one eye to fill in for what the other is missing. If you close one eye, the brain finds ways to compensate for the missing data. Blind and you don't know it. For those without vision impairment, did you know you were blind for up to 4 hours a day? This crazy phenomenon is where your brain selectively makes you blind, is called saccadic masking. When there is rapid eye movement, the brain produces a still image instead of an active one. Think of a video camera moving quickly from left to right. It might seem slightly blurred. The same would happen with your eyes, so the brain pauses the frame instead. Don't believe it? Go to a mirror and quickly move your eyes from left to right, right to left. You won't see your eyes move. The gap in perception goes undetected. We do it often enough to lose some time during the day. Your brain blinds you daily, whether it's for 4 minutes or 4 hours. Inattentional blindness proven by a monkey. Another trick of the brain is when it filters out other incoming sensory data based on our focus. It's called selective attention or inattentional blindness. In their research, Christopher Chabry and Daniel Simmons discovered that when you focus on one thing, you can easily overlook another. You can't see what is in plain sight. Selective attention was proven with their famous invisible gorilla experiment, which they turned into the book, The Invisible Gorilla: How Our Intuitions Deceive Us. The video demonstration of this experiment shows 6 people, 3 in white shirts and 3 in black shirts. In it, the viewer is supposed to count how many times the white team passes the ball, requiring focused attention. While passing the ball among the players, a person in a gorilla costume walks into the middle of the frame, pounds their chest, and walks off camera. They found that about half the participants didn't see the gorilla. The experiment revealed that we don't always see what is happening around us and have no idea we missed it.
I'm Dan Simons. I'm a professor in the psychology department at the University of Illinois, and I also have an appointment at the Beckman Institute for Advanced Science and Technology. My research here focuses on visual cognition, what we see, what we don't see, how much of our visual world we're aware of, how much we remember from one moment to the next. One of my best known studies was done with my collaborator Chris Chabry some years ago, and it was based on some much earlier work by our colleague Dick Neisser. And what we had was a video in which people were passing basketballs. So 3 people were wearing white shirts and they were passing a ball. And your task when you were watching the video was just to count how many times those 3 players passed the ball. We also had 3 players wearing black shirts passing their own ball, and you were supposed to ignore their passes. So as you're doing this task, after about 30 seconds, say, we'd have a person wearing a full-body gorilla suit walk into the middle of the scene, stop in the center, turn and face the camera, thump its chest, and then walk off the other side a total of about 9 seconds later. And what we find is that about half the people who do this simply don't notice the gorilla.
When Dan asked me to be a part of this experiment, I thought, no way, people are totally going to see me. I'm a 400-pound gorilla.
We'll ask them afterwards, how many passes did you count, which they generally get pretty close to right. We then ask them, did you notice anything unusual? Did you notice anything other than the players? Did you notice anything walk through the scene? And they'll say no. So we ask them, did you notice a gorilla? And the response is typically, a what?
So then the Simons guy says, we can show you and not everyone's going to see you? Yeah, right. How can people not see me? I'm huge. I'm ferocious. I'm a 400-pound gorilla. What was he thinking?
And we rewind the tape and show it to them again, and the reaction is typically, I missed that? It's shocking that you could possibly miss something as obvious as a gorilla. Of course, the people who noticed the gorilla are shocked that anybody could possibly have missed it, because it's right there in front of you.
I walk in there, I walk in the middle, all these kids are running around throwing this ball around, I stand there, I thump my chest. Not once, not twice, 3 times I thump my chest. That's scary, man. What else are people gonna look at? I'm big, I'm a gorilla, and they don't see me. What's up with that?
This is the intuition we have, that if something important or distinctive or unusual, like a person in a gorilla suit, walks into our field of view, we'll automatically notice it. The reality is that only about half the people do. About 90% think they will.
People are just so focused on counting those passes that they don't notice me. You know, I'm not trying to be subtle here.
Even more remarkable, my colleague Daniel Memmert used the gorilla video in a study in which he had people wearing an eye tracker. And what that does is tells you exactly where they're looking as they're watching this video and counting the passes by the team wearing white. And what he found was that the people who missed the gorilla looked at it for up to a second. So they looked right at it, but still didn't see it. Looking isn't the same as seeing. We have to focus attention on something in order to become aware of it.
How do you think it makes me feel? You know, I'm trying to be intimidating. It makes me feel inadequate.
The most consistent question we get is, are there some people who consistently notice the gorilla and other people who don't? So are there noticers and missers among us? And the reality seems to be no, that it's largely just a matter of a flip of the coin. We know when we've noticed something unexpected, but we're not aware of the times when we've missed something unexpected. The failure to notice people in gorilla suits is really a natural byproduct of something that we do quite well and that's very important to us, which is focusing our attention. We need to be able to filter out the distractions from our world and not let them interfere with our ability to do the task we're trying to do. The key is that when you're focusing your attention on one aspect of your world, you don't have an unlimited amount of attention to devote to other things. And we only see those things that we focus our attention on. The problem is that on occasion we filter something that we might want to notice, and we don't realize that we're doing that. That sort of mismatch between what we see and what we think we see is a really profound one that has all sorts of consequences for our daily lives.
Okay, I admit it. I didn't see me either.
That experiment is about focus. I can remember when the Tesla first came out. I admired the design. For fun, my husband and I took a test drive. Andrew and I both enjoyed driving it tremendously. Afterward, I felt like a schoolgirl with a crush on a car. I was Twitter-pated over this vehicle, and now I saw them everywhere. Were there more on the road? I am doubtful the sales of Tesla increased that high overnight. It can happen for things we want, like the Tesla, and for something we don't want. This focused attention leaves us open to only seeing the negative or the positive, blind to anything else that could counteract our experience. For example, when viewing someone you dislike doing almost anything, you will likely pick out something wrong in their actions, even if they were volunteering alongside you at the food bank. The cascade of thoughts, feelings, and activities that occur afterward could include speaking ill of them to others, a change in your mood or disposition, and the resulting rumination of negative thoughts that counteract the positive emotional benefits of volunteerism. On the other end of the spectrum, looking solely at the positive attributes of something or someone might close your eyes to a potentially unhealthy situation. Rumination. I enjoy that word because I remember visiting a farm on a grade school trip and watching a cow chew. It was then that I learned what it means to ruminate. After ingesting their feed, cows regurgitate what they just ate, chew it, and then swallow it, only to do it all over again. They call that process rumination. Cows do it to digest their food better. At the time, I thought it was the most disgusting thing ever. Who eats what is essentially their barf? Frankly, I still think it's awful, yet I do it with my thoughts more often than I would care to admit. That is why the other definition for rumination is deep or considered thought about something, dwelling on a topic or a thought for a long time, chewing on it again and again. Like everything, this can turn out for the better or the worse. According to Deanne Ware, PhD, in her article, Neurons That Fire Together, Wire Together, It can have severe consequences. The more we think about or ruminate on a negative thought, the more entrenched the thought becomes. Negative and traumatic thoughts also tend to loop. They play themselves over and over until you do something consciously to stop them. The more these negative thoughts loop, the stronger the neural pathways become, and the more difficult it becomes to stop them. This is why thoughts that cause depression, anxiety, panic, obsessions, and compulsions can become so difficult to combat. Digesting our emotions is necessary, but chewing on them for too long should be left to the cows. Recently, I had a very unpleasant incident with someone. We share the same social circle, and we end up in the same room a few times a year. I don't hate her. It's just that we don't have much in common, and sometimes I find her actions annoying. After this recent event, I was so angry and kept going over and over the night's event in my mind, like a cow chewing its cud. I couldn't get it out of my head. Much to his delight, I tried not to endlessly discuss it with my husband, but I kept regurgitating it in my thoughts. What helped was changing my internal conversation by finding a way to let it go. I don't know what was going on in her life that day or the reason for her actions, but if it happens again, I will have the discussion straight away or let it go much faster. No more rumination, at least on this topic. Remember, it isn't about being perfect, but awareness of habits. Visual perception summary. What we see has a significant impact on our emotions. Now you know that your brain, not your eyes, is the one that tricks you. Not because it's trying to be a trickster and mislead you. Think back to the brain's duty to keep us healthy and alive, veering away from the pleasant towards the unpleasant to protect us. If we assign an undesirable designation to a person, thing, or situation, our focus will shift to guard us from what we deem displeasing or distressing. Our emotions are the cue that the brain is trying to serve us in a protective mode, unable to see the potential possibilities of pleasantness until we consciously change the view. This point is crucial to remember. Because the brain can filter based on our emotions, we could lose the opportunity to change our feelings because we can't see what is in front of us. Plain and simple. To summarize, our brain predicts what we see via sensory signals from the eyes. What we see isn't always the whole picture. What we focus on is primarily due to our emotions and what we expect to see. Intense emotions can make us blind and filter what we see, but ultimately, this is a choice. Sense of hearing. Hearing is one of our first senses, beginning in the womb at about 7 months. Babies can recognize voices pretty early on in life. Sounds have meaning and tell us something about the world around us. What you hear can inform you about a probable outcome. The sound of a siren in your home might have different meaning than while driving your car. In the latter case, you hear a siren behind you and you predict a ticket is in your future. Even language comes with predictive outcomes. We believe we know what someone will say because of a shared vocabulary, even more so when we have a close relationship with a person. Those exact predictions can also lead to assumptions. And we all know what happens when you assume. You make an ass out of you and me. Old joke. More often than not, we predict what someone will say and start responding before a sentence is complete. Sometimes we are correct, as in the case of a married couple who can complete each other's sentences. But even then, we don't always get it right. Contrary to what we would like to believe, we frequently predict conversations poorly. The weird stuff I have found while investigating how the brain uses sound waves is crazy. It just shows us how much more is going on than we realize. Seeing is hearing. Just as with vision, the brain also can predict an auditory illusion. The McGurk effect is a perceptual phenomenon that happens when a person perceives the movement of another's lips that does not match up. An illusion exists when there's a conflict between the motion of the mouth and the sounds you hear. When this happens, the mouth always wins, even when you know it is incorrect. If I ever was going to say, you need to watch this video, this would be the one. You can watch it by going to kimcordy.com/YYSS/senses, or just click the link in the description below. In it, the sound coming out of the man's mouth is ba, like a sheep, ba. But the shape of his lips is such that you hear fa instead. When you close your eyes, you hear ba. Open them and you hear fa. It is wild, I tell you. It is only one example of how the relationship between our auditory and visual systems work together to create illusions. It is only one example of how the relationship between our auditory and visual systems work together to create illusions. Many fun videos are available that demonstrate how our brain seemingly tricks us. The sound of touch. Researchers at the University of East Anglia, UEA as it's also known, in the United Kingdom, found that regions that respond to touch are also involved when we listen to specific sounds associated with touching objects. They found that these brain areas know the difference between the sound of me typing on my keyboard and the sound of a bouncing ball. Lead researcher Dr. Fraser Smith from UEA's School of Psychology says, "We know that when we hear a familiar sound, such as bouncing a ball, this leads us to expect a particular object. But what we have found is that it also leads the brain to represent what it might feel like to touch and interact with that object. These expectations can help the brain process sensory information more efficiently." A fellow researcher at UEA, Dr. Carrie Bailey, explains, research shows that parts of our brains, thought only to respond when we touch objects, are also involved when we listen to specific sounds associated with touching objects. This supports the idea that the key role of these brain areas is to predict what we might experience next from whatever sensory stream is currently available. Saying that our body is impressive is truly an understatement. What takes place that we take for granted or are unaware of is astounding. The voice that plays the most prominent role in auditory perception, impacting our emotions, is our internal voice. We don't need sound waves to disrupt listening. All we need is our mind with its thoughts. I worked closely with a person on a client project who was the internal project lead. Listening was not a strength for many of those employed there, perhaps because they were too busy, but this person was exceptionally skilled at mishearing. At the end of a long, tiring day, she demonstrated her lack of attention after interrupting me for the umpteenth time with an interjectory response that clearly showed she wasn't paying attention. I could see her pattern of guessing what I was about to say and stopping me mid-thought. Frustrated, I finally said, "Would you please let me finish my sentence and complete my thoughts?" Upon which she declared I was abrasive and negative, along with a few other unprofessional comments about my person. I do not remember anybody ever calling me negative or abrasive. So I was dumbfounded. In fact, I have had more than one client nickname me Sunshine. Don't be shocked, but the relationship soured from there. Can you imagine how communication with others transpires in this person's life? In the organization, yes, the last chapter is about communication and when hearing converts to listening. While the internal voice may not produce sound waves, it can drown out the actual waves transmitted externally. It's weird and still unexplained by scientists how and why many of us have an internal voice. It has the power to change your emotions and thoughts. So we need to take those sounds from within seriously. Auditory perception summary. It is no surprise that other sensory systems influence what you hear. As with vision, conscious attention makes a difference in what we perceive versus what is being said, except for the McGurk effect. This peculiarity is when awareness and other communication tools cannot overcome the hardwired brain. To summarize, our brain predicts what we hear from the sound waves via sensory signals from the ears. Predicting those signals can involve multiple sensory systems, including vision and touch. Our internal voice can easily drown out the actual voices of those around us. Additional senses. We have additional senses that all behave similarly to vision and hearing in that other sensory systems can influence them and are predicted by the brain, which can have errors. Each sensory system is essential for our emotional and physical well-being. As I stated earlier, I could write volumes on each, but the purpose of this chapter wasn't to teach you about every sensory system, but to demonstrate that what we perceive comes with the potential to be incorrect without our conscious knowledge, allowing for humility, the potential to influence reality by managing our emotions and thoughts, the potential to improve our perceptions with our conscious attention. An additional bonus on my website, and I provide the link below, you can watch Your Brain Perception Deception. It is a documentary by Nova that will really blow your mind. It helps you understand even more how your brain shapes your reality. This knowledge is very important as it allows me to have compassion for myself when I get things wrong, compassion for others in how they respond, and the potential to improve my perceptual awareness. One sense needs its own chapter, the lesser known sense of how we feel inside.